My name is Rich Wilkie, and this is a video of me painting the little flag girl. I painted her in April of 2022. She's one of the 100 Ukrainian refugees I've painted since Putin's invasion. I prefer painting on chipboard. I usually wipe it down with water before I start sketching out the rough. You can see it drying here. I do this to clean off the dirt and the schmutz. Also, the water helps bring up the grain of the wood so that the paint has something else to hang on to. Because the chipboard is dark, I use a white watercolor pencil to sketch in the figure. This makes it easy for me to erase all my mistakes with just a little bit of water. Here I'm going over the initial sketch with an ultramarine blue wash. I usually only take one pass at the rough, but in this case I felt like I needed a better understanding of the forms of her face. I prefer working with water mixable oil paints. I'm not a big fan of the smell of turpentine, and I want to live forever. You can see that both passes of the rough sketches, the white watercolor and the ultramarine blue, are fairly rough. I'm not trying to create beautiful line work. I'm just trying to rough in the big shapes. I'm using lines to describe shapes that describe the underlying forms. Here I'm starting to block in the colors. I usually pick a light color and a dark color for every area. Sometimes I'll add a third darker color. I prefer focusing on the face in the beginning. That way there'll be a clear area of chipboard that I can rest my hand on while I'm working on the details of the face. The rest of the painting is going to be blurred out and rough, so I don't need to concern myself with precision in those areas. It's important for me to discover my mistakes early and change them before I spent too much time refining them. For a long time I was apprehensive about destroying any part of it that I had spent a lot of time working on. And so for a while I had a rule that at the end of the painting I had to scrape off 3 things to make them better. And that helped me get over that. Once I have the big areas of color blocked in, then I'll go in and start refining. I try to mix all my colors on the palette. Whenever I do mix the colors on the painting, I find that the colors get dingy. I use a limited palette. I find the fewer colors I use, the more unified my colors look. I prefer Indian yellow. It doesn't have any white in it, so when I mix it with other colors, it doesn't lighten them. It just makes them more yellow. I like cadmium red medium. I like ultramarine blue, and I like burnt sienna. I use ultramarine blue and burnt sienna to make my black. I don't actually use black. I find that my dark areas and my shadows are more interesting when I use a color to create them. I also use magenta. I find that with ultramarine blue it makes a really dark purple, and sometimes I'll use that as my black. I don't use orange in my palette. I find that Indian yellow and cad red make a really nice orange. Ultramarine blue and Indian yellow do not make very good greens. They're kind of dull and grayed down. So if I want a bright green, then I'll add that into my palette. And I use titanium white. I use a lot of white. The camera is right off my shoulder here, so from time to time you'll see whatever brushes I'm holding in my left hand pop up into the screen. But at least you won't see my bald spot. I tend to use different brushes for different colors. I don't keep just wiping off the brush and using it for different colors. I find that keeps my colors saturated and they tend not to gray down as I paint. There's nothing wrong with grayed down colors if that's what you want, especially if you're trying to get that color to recede into the background. But I try to be very intentional about which of my colors are saturated and which of my colors are grayed down. And I mix those in the palette. Before I start painting, I write down the emotion that I'm trying to express on a post-it note. I work out all the colors and I write that down on the post-it note and I put it next to the painting, or I usually put it next to the painting. This note here is actually for a different painting, which means I left the note for this painting on the pad and it's sitting right next to my right elbow on the table. I'm very dyslexic, and it's not the clever kind of Yogi Berra dyslexia. I really have difficulty reading and staying focused on things, so I need to eliminate all the distractions that I can. Squirrel! I don't have a TV in my studio. I don't listen to audiobooks or podcasts while I'm painting. I can listen to music if it's light and low. I turn off all my notifications, so no email or text or phone ringing. I do everything I can just to keep it quiet. My dogs are more of a challenge. They don't have an off switch. My paintings are all about conveying an emotion, showing the viewer what this particular character is feeling in this moment. When I choose an emotion, I try to think of something in my life that made me feel the same way. And I try to keep that in my mind while I'm doing the painting. Holding that memory in my mind while I paint helps me to convey that particular emotion. I want to feel the feeling that I'm painting while I'm painting it, which, while painting Ukrainian refugee children, can be difficult. For me, the important thing about creating is creating. It's not all the stuff that you have to do beforehand to get to the creating. So I buy the size of the chipboard that I want pre-cut. I don't buy huge sheets and then cut it down, because cutting it down is just a waste of time. And so this is a mindset. I buy pre-mixed paints. I don't buy pigment and then mix it. I don't buy raw canvas and then stretch it on a frame and then primer it. Or I buy chipboard and I just have to wipe it down real quick and then I get to painting. And then my whole area is set up that way. So I have my brushes are right off to the right, and you can kind of see the handles to my palette knives are on a magnetic knife holder thing right off to the left there. You can see a little bit of the handles. But everything is just right there. My water, my linseed oil, my palette is in my lap, so the color is just right there. I just dip straight down and up. It's all really easy. A lot of this sounds obvious, but when I was younger, there was a lot of talk about you have to suffer for your art. And so you have to mix your own paints and you have to stretch your own canvas and primer it. And it's just all crazy talk. Make your life easy because nobody else is going to. Well, that got dark. Here you can see I've added some of the flesh color and the hair and the jacket to the background. Once I blur all this in, it'll start to look like it's part of the landscape, and it will help unify the color. And now I'm into the finger painting portion of the painting, where I am smearing all the edges of the colors except just right around the eyes and the mouth. The viewer's eye is drawn to the sharper parts of the painting. I'm showing people where I want them to look at the expression. As I finish this painting, you'll notice that the end of the video is different than the still image at the end. And that's because when I finish a painting, I take a photograph of it with my phone. And then I look at it on my computer. And then I flop that image on my computer. And looking at it these different ways gives me a different perspective. It's as if I'm seeing the painting for the first time. And things will start to pop out that bug me. And I start to write those things down. And then the next day I will go in and I will make those changes. In particular, you can see that the flag has changed. I added a second flag next to it, and that blue color across the painting, that gives it more movement and unifies the color. I'm done talking now, but if you want to see more of my work, you can go to my website, richwilkie.com. And you can see all 100 of my Ukrainian refugee paintings and a bunch of the other stuff that I've done. All of the profits I make from the refugee paintings I'm donating to the International Committee of the Red Cross. So you can buy a painting or a print and you can help some people out. In the meantime, go create something and quit wasting your time watching videos.